Hello everybody and welcome to our video today where we will be talking about biology chapter 4, the nervous system. So let's start with the basics. We have white matter, which are the myelinated sheaths, and then we have gray matter, which is made out of cell bodies and dendrites. And so in our brain, we have more white matter inside and gray matter outside. In our spinal cord, we have more gray matter inside and white matter outside. So this is just a diagram of a neuron. We have our dendrites, the nucleus, the cell body. The whole thing is the axon. And then we have our axon terminal over here. And then these little things in here are our node neuron bays with our myelin sheaths. So our next picture diagram is the neurotransmitter and the synapses. So here you can see that an action potential is propagated down this neuron. And then calcium comes in and causes these neurotransmitters to be released. And then this is our synaptic cleft, which has receptors where these neurotransmitters will be passed down. So neurotransmitters can be removed from the cleft by breakdown by enzymes, reuptake, or by diffusion out of the cleft. And some important things to note in this chapter would be our glial cells, which are, there's a few different types. So first we have our Schwann cells, which make the myelin in the peripheral nervous system. Then we have the oligodendrocytes, which make the myelin in our central nervous system. So make sure you remember those two differences. And then we have microglia, which digest the waste in the central nervous system. You have ependymal cells, which are the barrier between, or which are found in the barrier between the cerebrospinal fluid and the interstitial fluid. And then you have astrocytes, which are found in the blood-brain barrier that controls the solute moving from the bloodstream to the nervous tissue. All right, so the next part of our chapter is the action potential. So we have our voltage on this axis, we have time on this axis. So one thing to know about the action potential is that it's all or none, which means it needs to reach this threshold in order for the action potential to be propagated. If it doesn't, it will not cause an action potential. Okay, so negative 70 millivolts is the resting membrane potential, and that is maintained by the sodium-potassium pump, which keeps the inside of the cell relatively negative. So it takes 3 Na plus out of the cell and brings 2 potassium in, which is why the inside of the cell is relatively negative. Okay, so once the threshold of approximately negative 55 millivolts is met, the sodium gates will open. Okay, the sodium channel will open, and this will cause depolarization. Okay, so as we said, the inside of the cell is relatively negative. So as soon as you open these sodium gates, the sodium rushes in, okay? And then around positive 35 millivolts, we get our action potential. Then we will have our sodium channels close, and we will have our potassium channels open, because this will cause the potassium to come out of the cell and cause repolarization, and will bring our cell back to resting membrane potential, okay, resting state. So as it's doing that, it overshoots this resting state, and during this refractory period, no action potential will necessarily be propagated unless it overcomes this amount before it gets to our threshold. Okay, so it would just take a lot more for an action potential to happen when it's in a refractory period. Okay, so then with the sodium potassium pump, you get back to resting state. So this is how our action potential works. This down here is just some overview of the nervous system. So we have the central nervous system, which has the brain and the spinal cord, and then we have the peripheral nervous system, which can be broken up into 2 sections, the somatic or the automatic. So the somatic section is also a voluntary section, so that's where you have your efferent, afferent, and different types of neurons, which we'll go over in a second. And then you have the automatic part of the nervous system, which deals with the sympathetic or parasympathetic portions. So sympathetic system deals with the fight or flight responses, while the parasympathetic is in control of rest and digest. So the different types of neurons, okay, that we forgot to mention earlier. So you have the afferent neurons, which ascend the spinal cord. Then there are interneurons which are found between other neurons. And then you have the efferent, which exit the spinal cord. So efferent and exit, afferent, ascend. That is a good way to remember. So those are all the important parts of this chapter, and we will see you in the next video.